For anyone still worried that the justices on the nation's highest court were still not taking concerns that they are ethically compromised seriously, after scandal rocked the court, those fears might actually be getting worse over the last 48 hours. That is because instead of demonstrating to the public that they are taking ethics issues and lapses seriously, two justices failed to file their ethics disclosures by today's 1 p.m. deadline. And they are Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who has asked for more time to file his annual financial disclosures following criticism that he failed to report luxury travel and real estate transactions with Texas billionaire and Republican donor Harlan Crow, and Justice Samuel Alito, who also delayed his disclosure this year. It comes on the heels of statements by Harlan Crow's attorney in a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee after the committee requested Crow's testimony, arguing that Congress does not have the power to supervise the ethics of the court. He writes this, quote, "To reiterate, Congress does not have the power to impose ethics standards on the Supreme Court. It therefore cannot mount an investigation for the purpose of helping craft such standards." Finally, because the committee has requested information about the leadership of a co-equal branch of government implicating sensitive separation of powers considerations, it must satisfy a higher standard in order to establish a valid legislative purpose for seeking the requested information. On this point, too, the committee's investigation comes up short. In a statement, Senate Judiciary Chair Dick Durbin and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse respond this way, quote, "Harlan Crow does not call the shots here. He is not a branch, nor even a member of government, and cannot claim the protections and privileges of one. The Senate Judiciary Committee has clearly established oversight and legislative authority to assess and address the ethical crisis facing the court. All options are on the table moving forward." Senator Sheldon Whitehouse joins us. Senator, I'm glad that the both of you responded in a letter. You read it, and it's not clear if it's audacity or arrogance or ignorance that fuels such words to be put in writing by lawyers representing Harlan Crow. Do you have a theory on the case?
Any one of those would suffice. I think the fact that any one of them could be true and all three might be is pretty clearly demonstrated by the fact that in the last round of Harlan Crow gifts to Justice Thomas, the question was referred to the Judicial Conference, which then applied a law to make a determination. So what we're doing here as a Congress is to look at how a body established by Congress, the Judicial Conference, implements a law passed by Congress, the Ethics in Government Act. How you can find a separation of powers violation in Congress doing that is a highly imaginative legal act.
Senator, what, if any, information has been revealed or back-channeled, if that even exists, about this delay in filing these ethics reports? It seems that an optimistic and starry-eyed person might think maybe they're finally coming clean, but that certainly hasn't been the pattern or practice.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the extensions themselves are not the problem. The question is what gets disclosed at the end of the day. And if you're looking at Justice Thomas, he has gone on a long binge of non-disclosure. And now he's got quite a lot of cleaning up to do. And I think he and his lawyers have some interesting questions to ask about what they disclose. They've said they'd update after the latest Judicial Conference correction that was sent to the Supreme Court. That happened in March. So do they disclose what's happened since March? Or do they disclose the full reporting year that they're obliged to? Or does he go back and correct all his previous forms to comply with the correct standard? And I think they're trying to sort their way through all of that. I hope that he's very transparent and he updates all his previous forms and corrects them to comport with the correct judicial standard.
Senator, the investigative reporting that gave us as a public the information about the hidden real estate transactions and the hidden tuition paid to Justice Thomas's dependents, it's documents work. It's indisputable. What is the investigative ambition of the committee in terms of understanding more than just what the documents reveal? And by that, I mean, would you like an investigation that goes into the relationship and other interests? I mean, what else would you like to know?
Well, we're still developing the investigative plan. But for instance, the Finance Committee of the Senate has an extremely legitimate interest in trying to understand the tax ramifications of all of this. In theory, you should file a gift tax form if you're gifting more than $17,000 to someone. And these vacations to Justice Thomas were certainly worth many times that. So what was the reporting? Why did they feel they needed to report or not report? There's a whole tax side to this. Was it disclosed as income? How was it treated? All of those questions are highly relevant to proper understanding of the tax code and to the Finance Committee's business. On the Judiciary Committee side, it's more about the operation of the influence machine that Harlan Crow is a part of, and exactly how many benefits he gave to Justice Thomas and his family. The fact that we have documents about paying his adoptive son, if you will, tuition, paying his mother's rent, paying money indirectly to his wife, and paying for his very expensive multiple vacations doesn't mean that that's all that he paid for. So that's why we've asked for these documents about what else, what other transactions took place between Harlan Crow and Justice Thomas. At the end of the day, another character named Leonard Leo figures into this, who has a contract with Justice Thomas to sell his book, creating revenues personally for Justice Thomas, while he's also filing briefs at the Supreme Court through fictitious named front groups, while he spent millions of anonymously raised dollars to campaign for the confirmation of Justice Thomas's new 6 Republican majority.
It just feels like every rock that is turned over is more evidence that real oversight would actually benefit the court and its reputation with the American public, which is plunging. It doesn't have much farther to go. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for jumping on and spending some time with us on this today. We will stay on it.
Thank you.